So, hello everyone. Let's get started. We likely will have folks come in during the session, but let's get started so we have time for our interactive activities and our educational components. I will introduce myself first. So, my name is Erlia Rasul. I am the founder and executive director at Terra Elysium. I'm really excited for you guys to hear the educational session and also the interactive activity we have planned. Now I will turn it over to the event supports and chat moderators to introduce themselves first, and then our presenters.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Lam. I am the Community Outreach Manager for Terra Elysium, and I'm super excited to have everyone join us on today's workshop. I will be, just like Ariel mentioned earlier, in charge of chat moderation. So if anyone has any questions or wanted to comment on anything, feel free to message that in the chat and we'll be answering.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tina Nguyen, and I am the executive support specialist here at Terra, and I'm also a event support for today. So I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Everyone, my name is Joel Da, and I am the Policy and Contracts Officer at Terra Elysium, and I can't wait to discuss urban planning with you guys today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica. I'm a part of development and marketing at Terra. It's nice to meet you guys.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shaniqua, but I also go by Shani, and I am the Content and Communications Manager at Terra, and I'm looking forward to our conversations today and everything that our presenters have to offer.
Hi, I'm Karina. I am the Data and Innovations Manager at Terra. It's nice to see everyone and nice of you to join us.
So why don't we jump right into it? Joelle will start us off. Oh, actually, I have to get into housekeeping rules first, so why don't we get into that? So just general rules that we always have to make sure that we have a nice and respectful interactive session. The first housekeeping rule is just please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. This session will be recorded, and that's just so it's as an educational resource on our website for folks who couldn't join us today and for folks who want to learn more about urban planning. Please feel free to turn off your cameras if you do not feel comfortable on camera. You can use the raise hand feature or the other features within the chat if you want to ask a question or contribute to the discussion. Respect everyone's opinions and viewpoints, and be mindful of language and tone. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please reach out to Tina or Jennifer. Also, you can send us an email at contact@terraelysium.ca. And just in general, respect the privacy of others and do not share any personal information within the chat or the breakout rooms. So now we'll go into the schedule for today. So we already did our introduction and our housekeeping. Then we'll be going into our educational session from 6:15 to 7. Then we'll have a 15-minute break from 7 to 7:15. And then we will have our interactive activity from 7:15 to 8:15. And then any conclusion, final remarks will be done at 8:15 to 8:30. So I'll hand it over to Joelle to get started.
So, as you know, this is a workshop in urban planning. So if you weren't aware already on what urban planning is, it's essentially how we build our cities, and a couple of key concepts will include sustainability, public spaces, and urban infrastructure with a minor focus on transit and in green spaces as well. So urban planning is essentially the process of just designing, regulating, and managing urban areas in cities and towns. So there's certain aspects that are really big in urban planning, and those can include, for an example, resource distribution, housing policies, social equity, proper infrastructure, and urban planners are not just, they don't work alone. They work with government agencies and other stakeholders to analyze the existing infrastructure in a community and try to make long-term plans to make sure that there's sustainable growth and development. So a big concept currently going on in Toronto is the concept of zoning. So if you're not aware about what zoning is essentially designating area or space for a certain use. And right now in Toronto, a big kind of movement that's happening is people are wanting more green spaces and less, for an example, parking lots and less uh, abandoned spaces. So zoning also plays a big part in urban planning, and as well as land use policies and how we integrate transit systems and affordable housing into the spaces that we create, as well as the evaluation of proposals and how we monitor and plan our cities to make sure that we're making it the best possible space that it can be. So here's a few examples of urban planning in Toronto. So we have the first one here, which is the Eglinton Crosstown. Just a couple fun facts that the Eglinton Crosstown is actually the largest transit project in Toronto's history, and it represents a major investment in Toronto's transit. As well as once completed, it will stretch 19 kilometers, and it will be the longest light rail or slash streetcar lines in Toronto. What's also not pictured here, if you're not aware, is the the Finch LRT, which is another major light rail project happening in Toronto that will stretch around 11 kilometers, and it will also be a major investment in Toronto's transit history. The second photo we have here is the waterfront revitalization, and it's a project to essentially make Toronto's waterfront a place of national pride and to increase public enjoyment. The third photo here, we have Evergreen Brickworks. And if you didn't know much about that, Evergreen is a formal industrial in transformed into a community hub, and it's really focused on environmental sustainability. They frequently host workshops and other activities throughout the year. So if you haven't been there yet, it's a great place to check out. There's a bunch of walking trails, and there's a year-round farmers market. And there's also host a lot of educational venues to learn about different cultural um, activities and a lot of different workshops as well. We also have the Bentway, which is an initiative to transform the land beneath the Gardener into a shared public space. This is another huge investment in Toronto's urban planning history, as it's essentially a almost 2 kilometer trail and a 500-meter connection to Exhibition GO Station. And as I was mentioning earlier about zoning, this is a key aspect in rezoning land that we want to reclaim and essentially greenify it to make it into a public space that everybody can enjoy. And the last photo here, so this is actually not completely in Toronto, but close to the border. This photo here on the right is a photo of the future of Vaughan Metropolitan Center. And the reason why this photo is here is a big part of urban planning that is growing right now is called transit-oriented development. And what that essentially is, it's a design strategy that seeks to create high density and mixed use communities around public transit hubs. If you weren't aware that there was a extension of Line 1 in Toronto that goes to Vaughan Metropolitan Center. So currently, the city of Vaughan, in partnership with the federal government, they have already invested $60 million and they're building a bunch of new housing, and that will include affordable housing as well. And a lot of things that will also include are a lot of new parks, a lot of community spaces, and a lot of new cultural spaces as well. So in a nutshell, transit-oriented development really has an emphasis on public spaces, bicycle lanes, pedestrian pathways, and it's really focused on sustainable practices. For an example, the use of green technologies like solar panels on the roof and the use of parks to maintain urban runoff. And lastly, I just want to end off that urban planning is a process that has many faces, and it really takes everybody to work properly. It takes multiple stakeholders, which includes the government, members of the community, which would be us, and a lot of policy making that everybody contributes to.
Thanks, Joel. So now we're going to talk about current trends in Toronto. Some keywords that relate to this topic include revitalization, housing, displacement, and affordability. So does anybody know what gentrification is or what they think it might be? Feel free to put it in the chat, or you can unmute if you want. If not, that's okay, because that's what we're going to learn about right now. So yeah, gentrification is actually the process where wealthier individuals or groups move into a lower income or a working class neighborhood. And this often leads to increased property values, rental prices, and charges in the neighborhood and changes in the neighborhood's character. So this transformation is typically accompanied by the displacement of longtime residents, local businesses, and cultural institutions due to rising costs. So how does this relate to urban planning? In urban planning, gentrification poses challenges because it can exacerbate social and economic inequalities, alter the fabric of communities, and affect the availability of affordable housing. Urban planners must navigate these complexities by balancing economic development with strategies to promote inclusivity, preserve community identity, and address the needs of all residents to ensure equitable and sustainable urban growth. So this is an example of gentrification seen over the years. And these are two pictures of Regent Park. It's historically known as a low-income housing community. So the picture on the left is what it would originally be. And the area underwent a major revitalization project starting in the early 2000s. And the project aimed to replace aging public housing with mixed income developments, including market rate condominiums, community facilities, and green spaces. While the revitalization brought new investments and amenities to the area, it also led to the displacement of many longtime residents and changes in the neighborhood's social economic makeup. So the picture on the right is what it would currently be, and you can compare the two images. Like the first one is just only one specific type of housing. It's like the apartments. And the one on the right, there's like the condominiums. There's also the multi-use buildings, and there's green roofs. It looks like there's larger sidewalks. But if you were living in this community, you would first of all have to be displaced out of the while they're doing renovations. And it's not like they could really come back because first of all, because it's new, it's going to be a lot more expensive. And and condominiums and this type of revitalization process would take like so long, like maybe almost a decade, depending on the project. So it would be really difficult for people that lived in the community to really come back. So that's like a really huge issue because of gentrification. In the next slide, this is another example of gentrification. So from these two Google Map photos taken in the same location, it's at 200 Front Street East, you could see the massive changes that have happened from 2007 at the picture on the left to 2023, and that's the picture on the right. With the gentrification of this area in Distillery District, many of the housing options have also become unaffordable for lower income families. So the key takeaway to this is that gentrification is not a bad thing all the time. However, it needs to be balanced because it could bring a positive change such as economic development, improved infrastructure, and increased investment in neglected neighborhoods. But it also leads to the displacement of longtime residents, cultural erasure, and exacerbation of socioeconomic inequalities. So the key is balancing gentrification by addressing the need for economic revitalization while ensuring that the benefits are shared equally among all residents and preserve the unique character and social fabric of these communities and mitigating the negative effects of rising housing costs and cultural displacement. Striking this balance requires thoughtful urban planning, community engagement, and policies that prioritize inclusivity, affordability, and social justice.
Great. Thank you, Erica. So now our next topic is going to be environmental racism. It's really important to address this topic because social justice and climate action go hand in hand. They're not separate entities, but they are together. So this is specifically environmental racism in urban planning, what this looks like within Toronto and across Canada. And so some key words to pay attention to that will arise are disproportionate, inequality, health disparities, and social justice. So environmental racism can be defined as systemic racial discrimination in environmental decision-making. So in policies, acts, and decisions intentionally or unintentionally, but usually intentionally, disadvantage racialized communities, often subject non-white communities to conditions that are dangerous and have health impacts. So before we get into this, I want to ask, how does this relate to urban planning? If anyone has anything that they would like to share, you can put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and unmute if you'd like, and I can give you a minute to do that. No, if not, that's okay, because we'll talk about it. So as I said before, environmental racism can be defined as systemic racial discrimination, resulting in institutional policies and practices that create a disproportionate of exposure of minority and marginalized communities to environmental hazards and pollution, and often as a result of discriminatory practices in the siting of pollution industries, waste disposal facilities, and other environmental burdens. You can think about the area that you live in and also areas that you feel are more rich areas, and think about how many waste disposal uh, places there are. Think about the proximity to landfills and polluting areas your location is, or even these richer communities. So this form of racism is rooted in systemic inequalities, where communities of color and low-income neighborhoods bear a heavier burden of environmental degradation, leading to adverse health effects and diminished quality of life compared to wealthier and predominantly white communities. So when we're talking about environmental racism in the context of urban planning, so environmental racism manifests itself through discriminatory zoning practice policies, land use decisions, and infrastructure development that concentrate environmental hazards in marginalized neighborhoods while favoring affluent and predominantly white areas. So for example, a really long battle that's been going on is the pipeline, the one that's been going through a lot of indigenous territories. That in of itself is a practice of environmental racism when we're talking about urban planning, because it's just disregarding all the rights that they have to the land, and it'll also be very, very unhealthy for the land in general. Urban planners may overlook or dismiss the concerns of minority communities when citing industrial facilities or waste management sites, leading to the perpetuation of environmental injustices. So moreover, inadequate access to green spaces, public transportation, and healthy food options in these communities further exacerbates the disparities in the environmental quality and the public health outcomes. So addressing environmental racism requires integrating principles of environmental justice into urban planning processes to ensure equitable distribution of environmental benefits and burdens across all communities. So now when we're looking at examples of environmental racism, as I said earlier, about thinking back to where you live, what your community looks like, the proximity to waste facilities, that quality of air in your community or communities with higher socioeconomic status or higher wealth. What does environmental racism look like in Toronto? So when we're talking about waste management facilities, these facilities are often disproportionately located in low income and minority neighborhoods in Toronto. These communities bear the brunt of the negative environmental and health impacts associated with these facilities. We're also talking about air pollution. So, certain neighborhoods in Toronto, particularly those with higher proportions of racial minorities and low income residents, experience higher levels of air pollution due to factors such as proximity to highways, industrial facilities, and diesel traffic. So a lot of the times, since Toronto is an urban area, a lot of the lower income portions of the city, they face a lot of air pollution because they're closer to highways, as I stated earlier, but there's also not much green space, if any at all, in these communities as well. And this leads to increased respiratory problems and other health issues among the residents of these communities. We're also talking about access to green spaces. So in Toronto, there are disparities in access to green spaces and parks between affluent neighborhoods and those with lower income residents, many of whom are from racial minority groups. The lack of access to green spaces can have detrimental effect on physical and mental health. If you're someone who lives close to a park, that is a privilege in and of itself, because a lot of communities that face environmental racism, like I said before, they don't have parks. They maybe have parkettes, but the parks are not well maintained. So think back to the parks in your community. Is the grass green? Is it freshly cut? Is it maintained? Are the playscapes for children very clean and polished, or are they rusty? Is there a lack of grass? It's muddy, it's brown, it's uncomfortable to take a walk in. There may even be issues with unhoused people living in the park, or there might be drugs or needles or a lot of litter around in the park. So thinking about these two things are very important when we talk about environmental racism, and also reflect on how that impacts us as well. So I have another question. Why does this matter? And if you'd like to take a minute to think about why environmental racism and discussing environmental racism matters, I can give you a chance to either write that in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to answer that question. So yeah, why do you feel that this matters, or this conversation matters? Yeah, I see it answer in the chat. It matters because it impacts people living in urban spaces and policy development. That's very true. A lot of the times when we have conversations about urban planning, we're all like, well, we don't build the cities and we're not the ones constructing the spaces, so why are we even having these conversations? But we're having this conversation because it does matter. It influences you and I, as people who live in these communities. Exactly. It's a basic human right. Having access to green spaces to be able to thrive in nature is very important. Just for overall happiness. A lot of people find a lot of comfort and happiness and things like that when being in nature. And also, it shouldn't be a privilege to have access to green spaces, to bright, beautiful grass and parks that are actually well maintained. So thank you for the answers. If you have any more, please put them in the chat, or feel free to unmute and let me know. But yeah, so these examples, they highlight the systemic issues of environmental racism in Toronto, where marginalized communities face disproportionate exposure to environmental hazards and lack access to environmental benefits enjoyed by more privileged communities. It's essential to address these disparities through policy change and community engagement, which is what you and I all here are doing today. We're engaging as community members and we're educating ourselves to understand more about why it's important to have conversations like this. And then notably, and also environmental justice initiatives are very important as well. And then notably, a recent article published by Eco Justice Canada shared that through a study based in Toronto, researchers found soil contamination, waste sites, industrial land use, and more disproportionately hurt areas that are home to racialized communities, recent immigrants, and people with low income. And as Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world, that's what it prides itself on, it's very disheartening to hear that a larger portion of our immigrant population are in areas that are disproportionately hurt by environmental racism. Okay, and then we're looking at a little bit more examples of environmental racism, and then I'll hand it off to Karina. So what you see in these two images here on the left, it's in black and white, and there's a big sign that says, please boil your water before drinking or cooking. So boil water advisories have been a really big thing, especially in Indigenous communities. But basically, it means your water is contaminated. It's not safe for consumption straight out of the tap. That's another privilege that we all have if we're able to consume water straight from the tap. But if not, then you want to boil it first so that you're not getting sick or that you're not taking in anything that's not meant for your body. And then on the right, we have a picture and it's by a shoreline. And as you can see that there's a truck there and there's a sign and some barrels. So it's important to note that across Canada, there are many examples of environmental racism, some still happening today within Indigenous communities. Like, as I said before, the boil water advisory, some of them are older than you and I won't age myself, but there are some that have been around for like a decade or two, which is really unfortunate. I think especially given the fact that we're in Canada and we have some of the largest bodies of water are fresh water. Everyone should have access to fresh water when it comes to turning on your tap. So it is really disheartening and really sad to see that, especially in Indigenous communities, boil water advisories are so common. Historically in Canada, Indigenous and African Nova Scotian communities have been the most impacted by environmental racism. So a very specific example of this is Africville, Nova Scotia. So Africville is just outside of Halifax, and it was a small settlement that former American slaves established in Nova Scotia after the War of 1812. Its residents had no running water, no sewage system, no garbage pickup, no street lights, no public transportation, nothing, no paved roads. It boasted an open dump, an incinerator, a prison, a railway tracks, and an abattoir on its doorstep. So basically all the gross and dingy parts of community and society were what Africville had. And by 1967, after several years of study and talk, the city of Halifax planned to relocate the 400 citizens of Africville and demolish their houses and all the community buildings. So I know that's a lot of information to digest and to take in, but I do want to share that the key takeaway when we're talking about environmental racism in urban planning is that urban planning and environmental racism in urban planning is often caused by discriminatory practices such as citing polluting industries and waste facilities in marginalized communities, exacerbating environmental injustices. Addressing environmental racism in urban planning is crucial for promoting equity and ensuring that all residents have equal access to clean air, water, and green spaces. We want to foster healthier and more sustainable cities for everyone. So just having an understanding that climate action, ecology, environmentalism is just as much a social justice issue as it is a nature issue. We want to make sure that the communities that we're living in are equitable and everyone has access to clean drinking water. And as stated earlier before, it is a basic human right. So it's important to have these conversations. And now I will pass it over to Karina.
Thank you, Shani. So our next topic is food insecurity in urban planning, specifically what it looks like within Toronto and what contributes and causes this insecurity. Some keywords that we're gonna see a lot of in this topic are hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and access. So food insecurity, what is it? It is defined by the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization as the lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life due to financial or other resource constraints. This can manifest as uncertainty about where the next meal will come from, reliance on low quality or insufficient food, and the inability to access nutritious options. Sorry, my dog is being loud in the background, if you can hear him. So this reliance on low quality or insufficient food and food insecurity is a complex issue that is influenced by different factors such as poverty, unemployment, inadequate infrastructure, conflict, and climate change. So urban planning intersects with food insecurity through considerations of equitable access to food retailers, land use zoning for urban agriculture especially, as well as transportation, infrastructure, facilitating access to grocery stores, and main food insecure groups in Toronto specifically, they include low-income households, marginalized communities, and individuals that are facing housing instability or homelessness. So a question to think about is, how does food insecurity impact mental health and well-being? And what are some strategies individuals and communities can employ to address these challenges? And that is something we can look at. It's kind of a big question. So if we want to think about that for a minute, we can do that. But also if you don't have any ideas or want to listen or wait, and we can discuss it in a minute. Yeah, so there's some good answers in the chat, how it impacts you, because you can't function without food, and food deserts. Those are both very important. Food is obviously very important to people. Yeah, so some ways, community gardens. Yeah, community gardens are also becoming a big thing. They're a way to get more access to more people. Depression and dissatisfaction with one's quality of life. Yeah, some people can be unhappy due to their situations. Yeah, so helping in food insecure groups. Oh, more. Yeah, physically and we need food to sustain a living. Yeah, so all our answers are really good. Yeah, so a way to help food insecure groups involves initiatives such as community food banks, community gardens are also helpful, meal programs, subsidized grocery programs, and then different urban agricultural projects, not products, sorry. Preventing food insecurity requires addressing the root causes such as poverty, unemployment, inadequate social support systems, and the lack of affordable housing. Main issues today with food insecurity in Toronto include the rising food prices, income inequality, food deserts in certain neighborhoods, and challenges aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic, such as job loss and disruption to food supply chains. So now we have some data about what food insecurity in Toronto specifically looks like. So this data is from the 2023 Who's Hungry report. It's comprised of 67 data collection volunteers, and they use data from 79 food banks with 1,385 food bank client surveys, as well as 10 in-depth interviews. So in 2023, 2.53 million visits were done to food banks by people that year. That is a 51% increase from the previous year. As well as in 2023, 1 in 10 people relied on food banks, where the previous year it was more like 1 in 20. So that is a large increase. Additionally, 1 in 3 food bank users are disabled, and 55% have had to miss meals in order to pay for rent or other necessities. 31% have had to go an entire day without food. So if we take a closer look at the circle part, which demonstrates the demographics of these food banks, it shows that 61% of users are renters in non-subsidized housing, and 59% have a post-secondary education. 55% are single individuals, and 25% are children or youth. So some key takeaways with food insecurity is that it relates to urban planning in multiple ways. There's not one connection, there's multiple ones. Urban planners must consider access to food sources such as grocery stores and farmers markets within neighborhoods, as well as the affordability of these food options. They also must address issues like food deserts and where residents lack access to fresh and nutritious foods due to lack of nearby grocery stores or transportation options. Additionally, urban planners may work to implement community gardens, urban agricultural initiatives, and policies that support equitable access to food resources for all residents within urban areas. So our next topic relates to food insecurity. It is food waste. So we're going to explore that in relation to urban planning and Toronto specifically. Some keywords that will arise throughout this section are waste management, distribution, and sustainable practice. So what is food waste and why is it important? So food waste in Toronto encompasses discarded food from households, restaurants, grocery stores, and institutions, contributing to environmental, economic, and social challenges such as greenhouse gas emissions, wasted resources, and missed opportunities for food, as well as missed opportunities for food redistributed to those who need it. Food waste is important to Torontonians because it impacts environmental sustainability, worsens food insecurity, and represents a significant economic loss for individuals as well as the city as a whole. So if we look at how this relates to urban planning intersects with food waste through strategies like zoning regulations for composting facilities, waste management infrastructure, and promoting sustainable food systems within urban areas. Main food waste issues in Toronto include surplus food from restaurants, grocery stores, and households, inefficient distribution systems, and inadequate diversion of organic waste from landfills. Some solutions to food waste in Toronto are something we can look at in our question. So how can individuals and communities in Toronto reduce food waste at home and in local businesses, and what innovative solutions can be implemented to address this issue? Once again, it's a bit of a question that might require some thought. So I'll give you a minute. You can put answers in the chat. Yeah, so some food waste apps. There's some really good apps out there. I've used them. And yeah, you get really good like deals on things that stores and restaurants would normally throw out. So that is good for those who need it, as well as just reducing waste. Composting, discounted items at the store. Yeah, those are both good. Composting is an issue. I know a lot of people somehow in some of my neighbors just don't believe in composting. So that is something that is a good thing. And discounted food items, yeah, that is good as well. And public pantries and businesses that sell odd-looking fruits and vegetables, yeah, both of these are really good as well. There is a lot of different businesses popping up that like they specifically take the not pretty fruit. So that's really good because there's still it's the same thing. It's just not as nice to look at. So those are good. Public pantries also very good. Then you can kind of give what you've got and take what you need. Yeah, so some solutions to food waste in Toronto involve implementing programs such as food recovery initiatives. Oh, we have another answer. One sec. Yeah, planning meals in advance, shopping with a list to avoid excess food. Yeah, exactly. If you go knowing what you need. Storage techniques for different types of food to extend the freshness and usability. Yeah, that too. And regularly checking the fridge and pantry and using items before they expire. And being creative with leftovers can cut down waste. Yeah, those are all really good ideas as well. Because if you don't know what you have in your fridge, you're going to end up with a lot of expired items. And storage techniques, yeah, there's a lot of like vegetables and things that people don't really think of what they're going to do with them when they bring them home, and then they can last so much longer if you like put them in water, like carrots. I learned if you cut them up and put them in water, you can keep them for so long. Yeah, so those are all really good ideas. So yeah, different programs such as food recovery initiatives, composting programs, innovative technologies like food sharing apps, to redistribute that extra food and reduce waste are all good. Food waste contributes to food insecurity by squandering valuable resources that could have been used to feed those in need, perpetuating a cycle of inefficiency and worsening disparities in access to food resources within the city. So now we have a video for you to watch.
There's no sound.
We're producing enough food to feed everyone. People are still hungry, yet we're wasting food and prices keep going up.
About 60% of the food produced in Canada annually is wasted, and a lot of that is still edible when it's thrown away. A homegrown Toronto company is trying to make a dent in that number.
Spoke to farmers, spoke to greenhouses to see what was going on, and it turned out that a lot of things that just didn't look pretty enough, or maybe they had in surplus, were end up going to the landfills.
Divyansh Ojha, CEO of Odd Bunch, explains that fruits and vegetables that don't meet aesthetic standards, ones that look a little odd or different, never make it to the grocery store. And it's not just the unattractive ones that don't pass muster.
So you can't expect a carrot to grow all evenly sized. But to sort of cut down on certain transportation costs, their packaging needs to be uniform. So anything that's not the right size, not the right shape, they're not able to actually package them and send it off to the retailers.
So that gets tossed in the garbage too.
The best case outcome there is if they are willing to ship it to let's say a cattle farm, when there's 2-3 million Canadians that don't know where the next meal is coming from. How is it that we're feeding cattle?
Meanwhile, the price of food continues to go up. Odd Bunch's mission is to divert all that perfectly edible produce away from landfills and onto Canadians' tables.
We work with farms, greenhouses, distributors. Wherever there is waste, we will go.
The food that would otherwise be wasted is then sorted into curated boxes based on what's available that week.
Boxes start at $20 plus delivery for a box, which is about 15 pounds of fresh food.
Thank you so much.
Customers say during a cost of living crisis, that's much more bang for your buck than the big grocery chains.
Groceries are so expensive for everyone right now. And for me, I love to cook and I love to eat well and eat really healthy. And it was just getting way too expensive. So this was a really great option.
Thank you. The vegetables and fruits that I've received have been pretty much the same as the grocery store. If you compare what you can get at the grocery store, you're saving a significant amount of money.
Ojha says the business is proof that fresh produce and other food can be made widely available to Canadians at affordable prices.
We're not necessarily a very small scale service now. We service everywhere from pretty much Windsor all the way to Montreal.
Yeah.
So we've proved that this model can be scaled. It's ironic that a business like this needs to exist. If the grocers or the bigger players are able to take pretty much everything that is offered to them and some of the stuff they're able to discount and just sort of blow out at cheaper prices, then we go out of business. And I wouldn't be complaining.
Until then, he says they'll keep up their mission of saving food and money. Dilshad Berman, City News.
Thank you for that video. I will get into, before I get into the next section, I wanted to share a quote with all of you that speaks to everything we had discussed earlier. And the quote is, "There is no logic that can be superimposed on the city. People make it, and it is to them, not buildings, that we must fit our plans." So now heading into the next section, this section is urban green space. This is our second last topic, and it is specifically going to be examining Toronto and the green spaces in Toronto, what these spaces look like and how they can be incorporated and why they even matter. So keywords for this section include parks, recreational spaces, and natural environments. Next slide, please. So take a moment to think about your dream city if you were an urban planner. Now, I have a few questions. And my first one is, what do you guys think are the specific benefits of urban green spaces? What are those benefits? What are those benefits for our communities? And how do they contribute to the overall well-being of residents? So I'll give you a moment to respond to that question. Dog parks, yes. Cleaner air, definitely. Physical health, yes, of course. Yeah, definitely all those things. And those are all a community garden. Yes, that's great. So specifically, when reflecting on your own cities, someone had already said, I want a community garden in my community. So perhaps that means that you don't have enough green space around you. And so that is my next question. Do you feel that there are enough green spaces around you in your communities? Someone said lots of mental health benefits. For example, walks through parks can impact physical health, definitely. So do you feel like there is enough green space around you? There is? Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I personally live in the East End, so I would say there is more green space, but when I was downtown quite often, I felt that there wasn't. It was a concrete jungle, as those would say. Someone said, no, I definitely would like more parks for my area. Someone said, not really. Another person said, I don't think there is enough. There's too much parking lots and suburba. Yep. And then someone said, yeah, I have quite a few around. So it's mixed answers. So that's good to hear. Now, my final question before I get into the urban green space educational portion is, if you could create a dream city as an urban planner, how would you integrate green spaces? I know somebody had said dog parks, community gardens, maybe decreasing the amount of parking lots. What else would you guys incorporate to really amplify green spaces in your environments? Green roofs, yes, that's a great one. Rooftop gardens, yes, that's a good one. Greenhouses, I like trails through forests, yep. So these are all great answers. And yeah, in an ideal dream city, these would be wonderful to incorporate, and they would come with many physical and mental and benefits in general. So now moving into the educational bit. So urban green spaces encompass areas within cities characterized by vegetation, such as parks, like a lot of you had mentioned, community gardens, green rooftops. They are crucial for several reasons. So the first being environmental benefits. So green spaces mitigate the urban heat effect, which we will talk about a little bit more later. They improve air quality and reduce flooding by absorbing rainwater runoff. The ecological importance is that they support biodiversity, they provide habitats for wildlife, and they preserve native ecosystems, making it possible for natural environments to thrive. So in regards to social and health benefits, so access to green spaces promotes physical activity, mental well-being, and community engagement. And there's a lot of economic value as well that comes from well-maintained green spaces. They really do enhance property values, attract tourism, and stimulate local businesses. So examples of incorporating green spaces in cities include parks with recreational amenities, green streets with trees and bioswales. Bioswales are essentially channels in which stormwater runoff is managed, community gardens, urban forests, green roofs, vertical gardens on buildings. These are all ways to incorporate green spaces in cities. So the key takeaway here is that integrating green spaces into urban planning creates for more sustainable, resilient, and livable cities for both people and the environment. So now I'm going to show you examples of green spaces in Toronto. We're going to start from the left. So first up is the Toronto Metropolitan Urban Farm. So this urban farm operates two rooftop farms on campus to produce and distribute food. It facilitates research and engages the community through ecological rooftop farming and food justice initiatives. The urban farm strives to support the health and well-being of the community and surrounding ecosystem by using practices that are ecologically, socially, and financially just. Moving on, we have the Allen Gardens Conservatory. So this is on Gerrard Street. Some of you may have seen it. It is beautiful. And the Island Gardens is essentially a park, and there is an indoor conservatory. It's an indoor botanical garden with over 4 greenhouses, comprising over 16,000 square feet. The indoor conservatory features lots of colorful plants. They're very beautiful from around the world, as well as many native species and small animals like turtles and fishes. Specifically, the next one we have, the last one, the third image, is the Riverdale Farm in Riverdale Park. And this is a historic working farm located in the heart of Toronto. It's situated in the Riverdale Park East area. So the farm provides visitors with a glimpse into rural life within urban landscapes. It features farm animals such as cows, pigs, sheep, goats, chickens, and even horses, as well as gardens and green spaces. The visitors can explore the farm's grounds, interact with the animals, and learn about agricultural practices and heritage farming methods. Riverdale Farm offers educational programs, events, and activities for people of all ages. So it's a very popular destination for families, school groups, and tourists seeking a rural experience within the city. Now we're going to head into our next section, and this essentially is, it ties the bow on everything we've discussed today. So how can we integrate nature? So key concepts that we'll be talking about are sustainable urbanism, green infrastructure, and balance. And we're essentially looking at specific strategies and methods that can be executed to be able to create a more sustainable city. So before I get into the specific examples on here, I just want to draw attention to the legend on the bottom left. So there is a legend for urban planners and everyday citizens. And I'll explain why I did this, but blue is for urban planners and green is for everyday citizens. So it is certainly understandable for folks to feel like they aren't sure how to mitigate the current issues seen relating to urban planning. We had a lot of different topics that were discussed today, especially in big cities like Toronto and across the globe. Thus, it is important for everyone to take out of our educational session ways to address these issues discussed today. We wanted to provide all of you with potential strategies for not just for urban planners, but also for all of you who may not be sure on how to contribute. I know everyone may not know about urban planning and everyone may not be an urban planner, so it's great to know what we can do ourselves. So starting on the left-hand side, I am going to start with the green highlighted. And so that is for everyday citizens. So ways to add a more sustainable urbanism into your life is adopting sustainable transportation methods, such as walking, cycling, or using public transit to reduce carbon emissions and promote a healthier urban environment, as well as participating in community gardening initiatives, like that was said in the chat. This will cultivate urban green spaces and promote local food production, as well as supporting and encouraging businesses that prioritize sustainability and environmentally friendly practices, such as farmers markets and eco-friendly stores. In terms of the blue, so this is specifically for urban planners, implementing mixed zoning regulations to create walkable neighborhoods that reduce the need for vehicle transportation and encourage community interaction, as well as incorporating renewable energy sources such as solar panels and wind turbines, as well as reducing reliance on fossil fuels. And lastly, designing green building standards and incentives that encourage the construction of energy efficient and environmentally sustainable buildings. So now moving on to our center list, which is green infrastructure. I will start with the green again. So ways to incorporate this is perhaps as an everyday citizen participating in tree planting initiatives to increase urban tree canopy coverage and provide shade and cooling effects in urban areas. This also really helps with the urban heat island effect that we feel in the summertime, where heat's just not being absorbed properly because of our surfaces and because we're sort of a concrete jungle. So trees would really help with that. Supporting the preservation expansion of urban parks and green spaces through volunteering, community advocacy, installing rain barrels or rain gardens at home to capture and filter rainwater, reducing stormwater runoff and promoting groundwater recharge, as well as partaking in a variety of composting solutions that increase organic matter in soils and improve the overall health of urban soils, which unfortunately suffer a lot due to the different urban activity that happens throughout the year. So for urban planners, this may look a little bit different. For urban planners, it may be incorporating green roofs, as we had mentioned, living walls into buildings, as well as enhancing urban biodiversity, which will improve our air quality and reduce the urban heat island effects, as well as implementing permeable pavement and bioswales in streets and parking lots to manage stormwater runoff and prevent flooding within the city. And lastly, designing green corridors and wildlife habitats within urban areas to connect fragmented ecosystems and promote the overall biodiversity conservation. Now, our final section, which is on the right, which is arguably probably the most important for today, is balance. And balance is a huge part of anything in regards to urban planning. Nothing is either black or white. Everything is sort of in a gray area. And so we want to make sure that we give options to encompass that. So for everyday citizens in green, this could be practicing responsible consumption habits such as reducing waste, recycling, supporting sustainable products to minimize environmental impacts, as well as reaching out to your local stores and restaurants about their food waste and seeing if you can redirect some of that food that gets thrown out. There are a variety of apps now, as mentioned, like Too Good To Go, Karma, or Flash Food, for example, which all help to redirect food waste. Engaging in outdoor recreational activities such as hiking, bird watching, or nature photography to connect with and appreciate urban nature. And this is a big one because when we appreciate the nature around us, when we understand why it's important to connect with nature, then we are able to really fight for it and really share with others the benefits. So really being out there doing recreational activities and sharing that is not only healthy for ourselves, but also healthy to spread the message of really connecting with nature. And lastly, participating in community cleanup events and litter reduction initiatives to maintain a clean and healthy urban environment. At Terra, we've actually had beach cleanups, and we plan on continuing to do so. And this really helps. And I think it's really important that since we're living in our environments, in our communities, cleaning up is something that all of us are responsible for collectively, and it would really help to preserve the overall environment. And lastly, for urban planners, balance would look like striking a balance between urban development and green space preservation by implementing green space requirements and urban planning regulations, as well as conducting environmental impact assessments for development projects to ensure that natural ecosystems and habitats are preserved and protected. Collaborating with community stakeholders and environmental organizations to develop and implement green space management plans. All of this will prioritize biodiversity conservation and ecological sustainability, as well as especially in relation to environmental racism and areas that are more vulnerable, conducting surveys within gentrified communities and lower income communities around environmental and social resource access. This will help inform future urban planning initiatives. So as in all, as a key takeaway for everything, by incorporating these methods and approaches into urban planning and everyday life, cities can achieve a balance between urban development and the preservation of nature, creating sustainable and livable environments for present and future generations. So now we will go into our break time. So we're going to have a 15-minute break. Feel free to stretch your legs, grab some snacks, or even chat with each other. We're going to be heading into a super exciting interactive activity where we'll be able to apply some of the concepts that we've learned, but also, we'll be able to really touch on everything discussed. Shaniqua has her hand up. Yep.
So thank you, Earlia, for the wrapping up the wonderful portion of the education bit of our workshop. Someone had put in the chat asking us what our favorite green spaces were, and I was hoping that we could get your answer on that as well.
Oh, awesome. Green spaces. My favorite green space, I would say it's beaches. I love beaches. Woodbine Beach is very close to me. I love going there. High Park is also very beautiful. I actually did a lot of research on the soil impacts and organic matter in High Park. And so seeing the differences between the soil around roads versus the soil within the more like dense and forested areas, that was really eye-opening, and it really hit home on the fact that, you know, with the urbanism comes degradation of the environment, but that balance is really important. So yeah, thanks for that question. That's an awesome question.
Thank you for answering that question, and thank you for posing that question in the chat. And I hope all of you have a great break. It is
Break is, someone just asked, the break is 15 minutes. So we will be back here. Yeah, feel free to grab snacks, and then we'll get into the interactive activity, which our lovely member Shaniqua will be discussing. Oh, somebody said I love Woodbine as well. I walk by there sometimes. Yes, it's super beautiful. Welcome everyone. It's great to see you guys all back. I think we are all here now. So yeah, why don't we have a chat about what we came up with, and all the different scenarios. So how about we screen share our Jamboard and what it looks like? I flipped through it and it looks awesome, so I'm excited to have a chat about that. Yeah, so why don't we look at scenario number 1? So lots of great answers on here. Does anybody want to speak for scenario number 1?
I can speak for scenario number 1.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, so for scenario number 1, it was a group of 3, including myself, Tina, as well as Reed. I'll just read it out for everyone. So scenario number 1 was affordable housing versus gentrification. Our prompt was, you are an urban planner proposing the development of affordable housing in a low-income neighborhood. You believe it's crucial to address housing insecurity. However, city councilors are concerned about potential gentrification and displacement of existing residents due to rising property values. Citizens in the neighborhood voiced their worries about losing their homes and being priced out of the area. So us 3, Reed did have some technical difficulties, but that's no problem. We were able to screen share and everyone was able to provide their ideas. As you all can see, there's lots of ideas that we have going on. Lots of them coming from city councilors, urban planners, and then also just general ones that we just came up off the top of our head and added it in. I'll read out some for everyone. So starting off from the first one, from the city councilor's point of view, understand the potential consequences of affordable housing development on property values and existing residents. So I guess like just having a better understanding of the whole situation and being educated about the whole situation before actually taking action. We also have city councilors that, for city councilors, helping address concerns about gentrification and displacement. For urban planners, community and engagement participation involve local residents and gather their input to ensure the development aligns with their needs. Also, urban planners invest in public transportation and improve its infrastructure to connect the neighborhood with essential services. And then just some other general ideas we had. So, for example, doing assessments to verify who low-income families are, advocate more educational volunteering opportunities for youth in the area. And then for citizens' point of view, we have educate via workshops to inform residents about their rights as tenants, especially in the face of potential gentrification. Spread the word out about the new urban planning idea that's going on in low-income areas via flyers, mail, etc. And then for a city council point of view, we have dedicate a certain amount of spaces to affordable housing, increase funding for educational programs and targeting marginalized communities. Citizens point of view, we have advocate for more affordable housing initiatives, participating in public hearings, writing letters to local newspapers and engaging with elected officials. And then just in general, reassure citizens through word of mouth and statistics from previous successful low-income neighborhoods. And also lastly, anti-displacement policies. So implementing robust anti-displacement policies to safeguard existing residents from being pushed out due to rising property values. So that's what the three of us came up with.
Wonderful. Those are lots of wonderful ideas, and it just shows you guys had a very rich discussion and a lot of great ideas. Some need that should be implemented, and others that are great ideas and in general understanding the different perspectives from everybody. Because city councilors, urban planners, and citizens don't necessarily have the same perspective, but finding that balance is super important. So why don't we go to scenario number 2 now? Thank you, Jennifer. Does anybody want to speak for scenario number 2?
Yeah, I can speak. So scenario 2 was me and Erica. We did have somebody else, but they left shortly into it. So yeah, ours was looking at environmental racism in industrial zoning. So we kind of looked at the 3 different roles. So for urban planning, we kind of were thinking that often the urban planner does not live in the area, they're just hired to do their job. So they are a bit more monetary focused. They don't necessarily consider how the people will be impacted. Whether it's because they're looking at the area, say on a map, trying to figure out where's the best spot to put something, rather than actually being involved with the community. As well as they should look at the proximity that they're going to be putting this facility to the people, and to important spots of the community, as well as trying to weigh or at least consider potential health impacts and side effects. So kind of weighing the risks and benefits to putting in a facility, even though it creates jobs. Are people going to get really sick? They should consider those options. As well as often urban planners are only thinking of the benefits of the local community. So they get jobs, but they don't really think about the negative implications of having something that close. That it is good they have jobs, but is it good they have jobs if they either are losing out on something else or are getting ill or having they just comes back down to weighing the option, like the risks, like a benefits versus costs. Then for citizens live in the community, they're active participants. They know who the people are, what the people are like, what the community is generally like. And they also are the ones who are going to live with this facility. So their input is really valuable. So we said that they can share their own ideas and perspectives to the city councilors and urban planners to ensure their needs are met through discussions or what not meetings. For city councilors, add policies that force industries to measure their air pollution, waste discharge, and noise pollution so it can be managed accordingly. So putting in proper regulations and policies on these things is really important. As well as policies should be in place to ensure industries are located at a good distance away from communities, bodies of water, and public spaces. So as the city councilors who are part of the people implementing these things, they need to look at putting in rules around and regulations around how close to environmental and people. Yeah, so just basically looking at proper rules and regulations, as well as making sure citizens are heard.
Thank you, Karina. That's actually wonderful. I do think that that's a very good point that you brought up in regards to proximity and urban planners not living in the spaces, right? If you can make a plan for a place, you can make regulations and policies, but at the end of the day, the people living there are the ones that are living with whatever decisions are made and whatever impacts that there are. So I think that is a super big point. And I think that integration, especially regarding industrial zoning and environmental racism, I think really the citizen perspectives are even more important than other situations, right? Because these are health impacts, these are people's livelihoods. So I think this is super important and lovely answers. So thank you for sharing, Karina. Why don't we move to scenario number 3 now?
Speak for scenario 3. So for scenario 3, it was just me and Karen, and we did our scenario a bit differently since it was only 2 people. So we essentially just did what each position could do. But first, I'll start off by reading the scenario. So the prompt was, you are an urban planner proposing initiatives to address food insecurity in low-income neighborhoods designated as food deserts, such as establishing community gardens and farmers markets. City councilors expressed skepticism about the feasibility and cost effectiveness of these initiatives, citing the budget constraints, and citizens share their experiences of struggling to access fresh and healthy food, emphasizing the importance of equitable access to nutritious food options. So essentially what we did is we just did what each position, the citizen councilors and the urban planners could do to address food insecurity. So for an example, like citizens can collect food cans that they may not eat and donate it to local food banks. And that kind of solves the problem of not having enough food to eat at home, and it also solves the problem of food waste. Um, a couple other things citizens can do is, for an example, suggesting to mobilize community volunteers to help manage and maintain gardens and markets, which can reduce, the operational costs, or even highlighting the health savings that by arguing that improving access to fresh and healthy foods can lead to better overall health. And a big part of this is making sure to have that open communication between citizens and city council, because a lot of citizens are struggling with inflation and they do have limited access to foods. So that communication is really important, because there are a lot of people that are struggling, and they, like, a lack of food can mean so many different things. It could have physical impacts like diabetes, hunger, obesity, strokes, and it could also have a lot of mental health impacts such as depression or maybe or anxiety. And a lot of citizens are actually facing these problems on their own, and nobody necessarily knows that they're going through this because there's not really a lot of communication between citizens and city council, because a lot of times city council, they are, I don't want to say rich, but they are normally well off and they will probably live downtown. So they're not necessarily in the areas that are facing food insecurities. So maybe probably the only time that they'll ever hear about the actual problems that people face is when it goes on the news, which is not like a great thing. And it's pretty sad that there are a lot of, counselors that are out of touch with their residents. So a few things that council can do other than implementing that communication is, leveraging public-private partnerships, propose to partner with local businesses instead of like big corporations, because when you invest in local businesses, you're supporting the community and you're investing in job growth and economic development within the community and not giving it to like billion-dollar corporations, especially nonprofits and academic institutions. They could share the cost and responsibilities. Another thing that council could do is introduce incentives for developers, to prioritize affordable housing in mixed income developments. And then lastly, the planners, a couple of things that they can do is just address transportation barriers that prevent residents from accessing fresh food sources by improving public transit. This is actually a big one. I mean, it's not that prevalent in Toronto, but in a lot of cities and towns, in northern Ontario and even in southern Ontario, a lot of people actually are blocked from accessing fresh food sources because their community is not served properly by public transportation. And if you don't have a car and the nearest grocery store is 30 minutes away, well, you're kind of out of luck and you might, you might have to like essentially starve because there's no way of getting there unless you're, I guess, spending a lot of your income on taxis or Ubers. And another way, urban planners can help by just exploring, innovative models such as land trust and co-ops. That is another big thing that's kind of growing in today's society. Co-ops essentially empower residents because everyone owns a stake in it, and it's not for the profit, it's for the community. And then the last two, planners can incorporate food access considerations by talking about zoning to allow for urban infrastructure such as the community gardens and farmers markets, and as well as partner with local schools and community centers to offer programs that teach residents about nutrition, cooking, and budgeting. And yeah, that's
Really great answers and very detailed. Thank you, Joelle, for sharing all of that. I think that there was a lot of really important things that you brought up, that open communication with the council from citizens, definitely the transportation barriers of food, and having the programming and supporting local businesses. Those are all really big points. And I think a very good approach to addressing food insecurity and food deserts in general. So thank you for sharing that. Why don't we move to the next scenario now?
So I'll speak for scenario 4 since myself and Yiming did it. So we did it a little bit differently just because there was 2 of us. So we tackled it from the perspective of urban planners and from citizens. So we're just also answering the question in general. So we were looking at vertical farming when we're tackling food waste through urban farming. We were also thinking about, community gardens and a shared compost lot. as well as a community kitchen so people can have meals together. They can food plan. They can have food together, meals together. They can also meal plan because, sometimes people make a lot of food and then it goes to waste. And um, when you're making larger pots of food and you're feeding more people, then the food doesn't go to waste. Greenhouses is also a really big one, especially if we're going to be having a community garden. And then food banks, as well as like a community fridge and community food storage. We really like the idea of a community fridge and community food storage just because it's one of those take what you need and leave what you don't need ideas. And I think it works really well for people. And then also when we were thinking about water, we were thinking about having community like a community water system that filters like rainwater and things like that. Because I know a lot of people are under boil water advisories, and also clean drinking water is a privilege, even though we live in a first world country. So having that collective water system for people to utilize if they need it, I think that would be very beneficial when it comes to using up spaces like empty parking lots and things like that for that sort of infrastructure. And then even a community farm, because it is legal to have a chicken as a pet. And chickens are really adorable, but they also produce eggs. And having a small community farm would be really great because there's a lot of it's very cost effective when it comes to getting like free eggs, free milk, dairy, these sort of things. It's really easy to make your own cheese, depending on the cheese, but it's very easy to do. So if they had like cows or like small goats or things like that, then you could make your own cheese, and that's something that you could do as well. And then also we talked about food storage techniques. So when we're having all these things, so we're having the community garden, the fridge, the rainwater system, the farm, knowing how to store your food properly in turn helps the community taking up space. So if you're putting something in the community fridge, for example, using wax paper or putting paper towel when you have your leafy greens inside of the reusable bag that's like airtight, trying to, what's the word? What is the, when you freeze, there we go. Freezing bread. Freezing your fruits and vegetables. That's also something that you can do, and it makes it last longer. So there's more food in that community fridge if people need it. And also vacuum sealing is a big one. They have reusable vacuum seal bags. It keeps the freshness of things. That's very easy to do. And it also helps in terms of storage. So that's what we were talking about when it comes to tackling food waste through urban farming. I really do support the farm. I think everyone should have their own personal chicken. But yeah, that's us. And thank you. And we'll pass it over so we can do scenario 5.
Yeah, wow, that was wonderful. I am for the community farm as well, and having my own chicken and my own cow. A horse would be fun too, just for the sake of writing it. But in terms of the community fridge, that was wonderful. And community food storage is a big thing, especially when it comes to like season round food preservation. I currently serve on a board for Leaf, and a lot of the stuff that we assess food preservation is a big one. So really freezing fruit, uh, sealing everything, that's a huge one. And I think the shared compost slot was also a really cool and interesting ideas. Lots of unique and really fun ideas here. Greenhouses are always beautiful. As well as, yeah, the community kitchen is a wonderful idea as well. So thank you for sharing that, Shaniqua. I will move to section number 5, scenario number 5 and 6, which I actually did. So I was having a conversation with myself, and and essentially filling in what I could here. So I'll read out the prompt. So for scenario number 5, this is preserving urban green space. The prompt is: you are an urban planner advocating for the preservation of urban green spaces and parks in the face of increasing urbanization and development pressures. City councilors question the economic rationale behind allocating valuable land for green spaces, suggesting alternative uses such as commercial development. Citizens voice their appreciation for green spaces as essential for mental health, community well-being, and environmental sustainability, urging decision makers to prioritize their preservation. So a lot of these are topics that we came across during the educational sessions, but basically through this conversation with myself, the first bit was city councilors. So of course they're all about commercial development, and what I wrote on the sticky here is that commercial development is better for the community and provides more businesses, which in turn will help jobs and mental health too. Or the citizen in response to that would say, well, we need more green spaces. Our air quality is subpar and we are struggling to be outdoors, which is greatly needed during long work hours and life stress. An urban planner could come in and say, well, I have an idea. Why don't we keep commercial developments but incorporate green spaces like living walls, green roofs, and gardens so that there are both improvements and developments? Where a city councilor will maybe say, well, why don't we see the data? Higher performing economy versus green spaces, which is better for mental health and community wellness in the long term. Whereas a citizen may also rebuttal that and say, well, we could also test the green space and see how it impacts the community, and that way we are building for the people and not just for the economic gain. A citizen may also say, why don't we look at specific data as well for tourism and increase property value because of green spaces, and in general, just better moral values around prioritizing mental health versus the economy. Whereas a urban planner may come in and say, well, city councilor, balance is fundamental and is not economy versus green space to see which is better for mental health and wellness. It is everything together. Balance, which was a big theme that we touched on. Those solutions could be green roofs, gardens, community gardens, as everyone said, commercial developments with green spaces, so that we are having that economic development, but we are also prioritizing the integration of nature and green space and parks and farms. I mean, there's a lot of economic value that can come out of farms, right? So even having our own chicken, there's benefits to that, and it'll prevent a lot of food being wasted as well. The next scenario, which I also did, number 6, we can flip to that. It is our final scenario for today. So this one was redistributing surplus food to reduce waste. The specific prompt here was, you are an urban planner proposing strategies to redistribute surplus food from restaurants, grocery stores, and food producers to reduce food waste and address food insecurity. The city councilors expressed concern about liability issues, logistical challenges associated with food redistribution programs, whereas the citizens are saying they're advocating for innovative solutions such as food recovery networks and partnerships with local nonprofits to ensure that edible food does not go to waste and reaches those in need. So this one, we had touched a bit about it before, but the city council would essentially be saying, well, logistical issues, if it's too costly, these programs only cost the economy, it is better to just throw out the food. Whereas a citizen may say, why would you throw out food when there are people hungry, and it doesn't fit in boxes? Like, we watched that video that Karina shared, and some of the food is just being thrown out because it's not fitting in boxes, or it just doesn't look aesthetically appealing, which really isn't a great reason for throwing out food when we have such high alarming rates of people being hungry and visiting, you know, and visiting for food. So another perspective on this was the urban planner's perspective, which is more so we can use food redistribution apps such as Too Good to Go, which we had mentioned, and we can also sell food at discounted cost. That way, it does not result in money wasted, because of course, bringing the food to restaurants and to food producers and to just anybody that's grocery stores and just throwing it out, that also is costing the economy, right? So it would be money saved in the end if the transported goods from farms or from wherever they come from would still be sold, as well as an urban planner. I think a good perspective for an urban planner would be really assessing the data and seeing how much food is being wasted, and is it more beneficial to save the food through these initiatives versus giving up on it completely, and through the great need that we see for food. I think that, just giving up on it completely is not really a great option in any case. But another solution that somebody wrote here is work closely with legal experts to develop robust agreements and policies that protect both food donors and recipients. Yes, of course, that is a great measure as well. Definitely the political and policy, and I guess the more practical and like legal agreements that could be put in place for different stores, for food producers, this would all help really avoid a bunch of food being thrown out. And Canada actually throws out a lot of food. So being able to really address this would not only help so many that are in need, that visit food banks, but also just have an overall more efficient system in place for food. So thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful interactive workshop. You all had wonderful answers. So I am going to say some final remarks, and then we are going to share a bit about Terra, and then we will turn it over to anybody if they have any final questions, and then we will end our session for today. So thank you so much for sticking around. So these were our references for today. I want to say thank you to our team. I'm very proud of everyone here, all the research that everybody put in. You guys had wonderful presentations, and I always love showing appreciation to the team because we have so many fascinating and interesting workshops coming up. So this was a wonderful one and a great start to us being together through this. Next slide, let's go into it. Yep. So we will be sharing a link to a feedback survey in the chat right now. And basically, this feedback survey is just going to help us understand more of the types of events you want to see, and also what you liked and maybe areas that you'd like to see improvement. These are all our social media. So we are on Instagram, we are on LinkedIn, our website, as we posted in the chat, but I will repeat it here, is terraelysium.ca. Our contact information. You can reach out to us anytime for questions or even inquiries about volunteer events. It's contact@terraelysium.ca. And yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to discuss future events. There's a lot of exciting things that we have upcoming, especially since the weather is warming up again. So to be able to host in-person events, beach cleanups, composting workshops, gardening workshops, as well as we do value like the indigenous stewardship aspect of things. And there's many different routes that we will be taking, and really exciting educational series that will be coming. So I want to say thank you, everyone.